melt is when I'm ocean wave.
Today on Handicappers Inside Podcast, I have Barry Meadow, betting guru. Barry has written at least two incredible books on thoroughbred horse racing betting. Money Secrets at the Racetrack, where he taught us how to bet the races. And recently he wrote The Skeptical Handicapper, which is, to me, the best book written about thoroughbred horse race betting in 30 years. So I'm really excited to have Barry Meadow today on my podcast. Well, last night the Wizards played the Lakers, and I was at the game, and the Lakers just destroyed us. I'm sure it made you very happy. Did you watch the game?
I was at the TV for the whole game. Happiness radiated throughout my body all game.
Yeah, exactly. I figured you'd be very happy about that. Well, Barry, one thing about you that it's very interesting. I know you started playing the horses at the harness races at a very young age, but you wrote a book about harness racing before you're even 21, and you've been a prolific writer about the game. Why did you start writing about horse racing before you ever knew much about it? What is it about you that you had to write about the game as well as play the game?
Well, I think anybody that writes, which includes you and I and many, many other people, we have our thoughts, we have to get them out. Now, we believe these thoughts are the most important thoughts that have ever been said by anybody. So we have to share them with the world. And so we have to find vehicles to be able to do that. And I read a couple of books on harness race betting that were out at the time by a guy named Bruce Gordon. And so I learned a little from that. I learned some more from reading Steve Chaplin's books. Tom Ainsley even wrote a book. But what I liked is the idea that here's something that nobody in my family knew anything about. I had no gamblers in my family. I had no friends who gambled. I thought this was something I could get behind because it was so foreign to my way of thinking. I started looking at the harness races when I was about 11 years old in the 5th grade on TV. They had a TV show, Racing from Yonkers. They had videotape, which was a brand new thing at the time. And I'm watching all these horses that all seem to be named Hanover, doing something. And I thought, this is darn interesting. So I determined to learn about it, and I did.
Yeah. Well, you wrote a book called Money Secrets at the Racetrack. And then one of the most important books ever written about betting on thoroughbreds. You actually provided the structure to bet. A lot of the things that I've done for many, many years are things you wrote about 30 years ago. Like, for example, if in the trifecta, never put the favorite in the third spot in the and horizontal bets and pick threes and pick fours. Like in a pick three, if you don't have a pick you like in 2 of the 3 races, why are you playing the bet? If you're playing a place bet, it should be a odds on favor. Don't play a long shot in the place bet. Many of the things that I've done for many years, I learned from you. Are those things you learned on your own, or did you get those from other people?
Mostly I learned things on my own. I always like to keep records, even when I was, betting $10 a race when I was 17 years old. I kept records of all my bets, try to figure out why horses won and lost, try to speak with as many people at the track as possible, which means I had to hear a lot of strange ideas along the way, and eventually try to figure out what is the way for profit. And I came to the conclusion it's just like something like real estate investing. A house is not worth something or worth nothing, but if you can sell it for 300,000, it's worth 300,000. It's not worth buying for 400,000, and you're not going to be able to buy it for 100,000. In other words, you have to come up with a realistic price of what things are worth. Then you compare what the market says, and that's how you make your decisions. And that's true of a lot of different things in life, whether you're buying on eBay or whether you're buying real estate or whether you're betting horses. It's not the horse itself, it's the horse. What is the proposition? What is he offered at, or what's the exact offered at? And is that worth playing? Is there a discrepancy between what you think and what the general public thinks? And fortunately, there were enough discrepancies over the years that I made a living doing it.
Yeah, you made a very good living enough to retire and not have to worry about the next winter. Well, it's one thing that's fascinating me is so many players that I talked to today don't know about you and don't follow your maxims. The things that you talked about 30 years ago, I still follow today. But it amazes me that people haven't read your book. I think a lot of it is because you're like a cold dose of reality. Many of the handicapping books that we read, they're well written. A great ideas about handicapping. But I think a lot of folks, when they read you, it's the honest truth, and it's kind of hard to take.
Well, sure. People want to hear that there's some system or method that you can make the track your private bank, and you can go whenever you want and make a withdrawal. It doesn't work that way. So what I like to do, I like to explain how hard it is. It's a challenge, but a lot of things in life are hard. Doesn't mean you can't do them. It's hard to be an airline pilot. It's hard to play in the major leagues. It's hard to do many things. It doesn't mean it can't be done if you study diligently enough, practice it, figure out what mistakes you're making, and always strive to improve.
Yeah. Well, the maxims that you wrote about in terms of betting strategy, have they changed over the years? I know a lot of the handicapping maxims and fundamentals have changed because the competition has gotten stronger through the proliferation of information, computer assisted wagering, other ways. But how about the actual betting maxims that you set forth 30 years ago? Have they changed at all over the years?
I think the basic ideas about betting remain the same. And these are not new. I was certainly not the first person to come up with this. I'm sure back in the days of David and Goliath, one of the guys said to the other guy, "Hey, look, I'll take the little guy, but only if I can get at least 5-1 on him." I'm sure there were people doing that thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't claim to be an originalist. What I do is I like to synthesize an idea, see if the idea works, practice it, and then try to explain it as simply as possible.
Mhm.
I don't like using giant words that people don't understand. I don't want to use equations when there's other ways to explain the same thing. And I try to simplify things. Very simple. If you have a discrepancy between your opinion and the crowds, you can play. If you don't, you can't.
Yeah. Well, in your brilliant recent book, The Skeptical Handicapper, you talked about how the game has changed and how it's gotten tougher. And it really has. And I've seen it over the years as a guy who's played the game for many years. You can see the game has gotten tougher. But the actual betting strategies that you wrote about in your original book, have they changed? Have the fundamentals changed at all over the years?
I don't say that the fundamentals have changed, but there's a lot of things about betting that have changed. They have, for example, jackpot bets now, which are only useful on the mandatory payout day. Otherwise, no point betting those things. So there are, and you can bet in 10 or 20 cent increments on a lot of bets now, which you couldn't do before, which means you could use more combinations. But on the other hand, that leads people to start using everything with everything, hoping for a miracle. And so they bet $500 and they win, and it pays 200, which is not really a good way to make any money. So the betting itself, I would not say has changed. I'd say there's more opportunities. For example, some of the ADWs have promotions, little bonus things they do, which you can calculate. Some of them are actually profitable. The problem is they're only profitable for very, very tiny amounts of money. For example, there's one popular one that several places do, that you bet on a horse, and if he wins, you get your money. If he finishes second or third, you get your money back. Well, it didn't take me long to figure out that if I just stayed betting very low-priced horses on this, doing the math, that has about a 13% edge for the player doing that. The problem is you can only bet $10 a race, and they only have it a few races a day. So if you want to make yourself an extra $15, $20 a day on the weekends, you can do that. But as far as large things that you can do that are big changes, I don't see it. There are certain things you can take advantage of. Their rebates are very common for most players now, whereas when I was playing, it was only for the big players who could get rebates. There are bonuses. Sometimes there are deposit bonuses. An ADW might say, look, if you deposit $200 today, we'll give you a $20 bonus. That's a pretty good deal. You don't even have to play. I mean, you have to play at some point, but you don't have to play that minute. So there are things that are valuable. Now, not all the bonuses are profitable. Some of them are not. You have to calculate each one, but it's some other little thing you can do for fun if you like to have fun doing that. As far as the major bets, they still have pick sixes, they got pick fives, they got trifectas. There's not a lot of new bets coming along. And one reason is pretty much they've covered the gamut at this point. Nobody's going to bet a pick 50. It's not going to happen. So I think the bets are pretty much set. The takeouts, of course, change from meet to meet. Sometimes the takeout's lower on the pick 4 at some tracks than on the other bets. Sometimes it's lower at the pick 5. So you want to try to keep an eye on that takeout, make your best bets, take advantage of rebates, promotions, and bonuses, and then do your work, which is the most important thing, because if you don't know why horses win and lose, you can't make predictions about races. If you can't make predictions, you can't come up with betting lines, and then you can't make money. Unless you look, you can always look into something, of course, but I'm talking about over some long period of time.
Well, in 2011, you basically retired from playing the horses, and you wanted to have a great retirement. And you know, when you play the races, there's always a chance you're going to lose. And you figured you made enough to retire, and you wanted to have a nice retirement. Do you think that you chose the right time to play the horses? For example, if you were a 25-year-old guy today, would it be a better time for you to play the horses, or was it better when you actually played?
Well, I might have kept playing, but my wife was retiring, so I think it's best if people retire together. She retired young from her business career, and I said, okay, I'll retire too. But I could have kept playing. I wasn't getting tired of playing, and actually, my last year was one of my best years. So I can't say that, you know, oh, I ran out of money and that was the end of that. We just decided to go a different direction. And of course, if I were ever to resume, I'd have to start from scratch again, keeping notes on all the horses, watching every single replay, doing all the stuff on the computer. And there's still no guarantee that I would win in 6 months or a year. This is not something you walk in and you suddenly start winning. You got to do a lot of work to do this, which is pretty much the same as anything else. You think Kobe Bryant only practices 3-point shot once a day? No, he'd go out there and he'd shoot 500 3-pointers. You got to work at this, and people don't have time. They don't have money. They don't have the interest. Maybe they don't have the skill and talent, and they simply don't want to. So you can't make somebody do this, but if somebody wants to do it, there's a lot of good resources out there that you can use to help you. People doing speed figure services and trainer records and workout reports and things like that. A lot more information now that was available that was not available when I was playing.
Yeah, it's funny because one thing about Barry Meadow is you want data, you want information, you hate the anecdotal. And today, just to give you a hard time, I sent you an article I wrote about key races, and I loved it because I'm like, Barry will love this. One thing that Barry Meadow hates, you hate an example of one race, because as you always say, I can show you 100 examples of when so-and-so did not work. And you show many handicapping books will show an example of something that worked. And then, it doesn't mean it's ever going to work again. And that was one of the reasons why you wrote A Skeptical Handicapper.
Well, maybe something would work, but it only works one time out of 5. And you're playing horses that, that are 6-5 on this angle. Not really a good way to make any money. So the fact that something happens doesn't make it a long-term thing.
Yeah.
You have to know whether the thing works over a long period of time. And a lot of the old handicapping ideas that maybe worked, I don't know if they did or they didn't, but they don't work now because there's so much information out there. For example, if you rank horses by your earnings per start, the horse with the highest earnings per start wins more than the horse with the 7th highest earnings per start. Yeah. However, you can't make any money with that information. It doesn't help you beat the track take. Recording the horse's last speed rating. Who had the best last speed rating? You'll have a lot of winners. Doesn't mean you're going to make any money. And in doing this, you have to figure out what's going to make you money, not just what's going to help you cash that day. Unless you go to the track once a year with your friends and you want to brag how smart you are. Look, I just had a winner. That's great. The thing pays $420. How does that really help you?
Yeah.
So I was always looking for things that could help me over the long run. That being said, the only way to do that, as far as I figured out, now there are other ways to do it besides what I did, is I had to keep track of every single horse on my tracks. I handle Northern and Southern California only. So whatever was going on at Woodbine or Arlington, I didn't know much about. I didn't never claimed I could make any money betting those tracks. But because I knew my local horses and trainers and jockeys, I could make money at my tracks. Doesn't mean I made money every day or even every week or even every month. But I knew over the long term, eventually I was going to make money doing this. And fortunately, it worked out.
Yeah, many of these things you covered in the Skeptical Handicapper. But before we get there, I want to get to how important to your career when you look back is your publishing work. I mean, you wrote Money Secrets at the Racetrack, which is to me the most important book ever written about betting on the races. And then 30 years later or so, the Skeptical Handicapper, which is to me the most important book written about handicapping the horses since 1990, or since Andy Beyer wrote his books. And you also had the Meadow Monthly, which is a monthly you did that had incredible information about betting the horses. It's stuff about the handicapping tools that were available to people. Tips that you would give to folks. For 7 or 8 years, you put together this great monthly. How important was your publishing and your writing to you when you look back on your career?
Well, people ask me, hey, did you make a lot more money writing about gambling or did you make it gambling? Well, the answer is I made it gambling. I made some money writing, but the reason I did that is I like to share information with people. I don't feel like, people say, well, if you know some secrets, why are you telling anybody? Well, they're not secrets. The secret is, you work hard, you watch races. Is that a secret? Or that's something that people don't want to do? I mean, who wants to sit there? I remember one time I wrote a book called Blackjack Autumn, where in 1998, I went to play blackjack in every casino in Nevada. I just got in my car, brought some money. I drove around for 2 months playing in every single casino in the state. When I came back, I had to watch 2 months worth of replays that I had taped. And believe me, I was so tired of looking at horses when looking at those 2 months, because I didn't play the horses for those 2 months. I was tired, but I know if I didn't do the work, I was not going to be able to make money in the future based on what all those horses had done who raced for 2 months. You have to sit and do the work. That means whether you're buying trip notes or whether you're making your own trip notes. I always did my own stuff, and I bought other stuff as backups. But I always did my own numbers. I did my own ratings. I did my own notes on the horses because I like to see things, kind of like if you're a basketball scout, you don't want to necessarily get a report from another scout. You want to see the player yourself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing about your the Skeptical Handicapper is you admit that it's okay to use the information resources that are available to us now. And you don't have to do it all yourself. And if you could find a way to augment what you already have, it could be a good thing. And one of the guys that you relied upon in writing your book is a guy named Ken Mazza. Tell us about your relationship with Ken.
Well, I've known Ken for many years. He's a thoroughbred analyst, and he has a computer program called HTR, and he has subscribers, and he does a lot of research on different handicapping angles. And for years, he printed a monthly for his subscribers based on the research that he was doing for particular angles using their particular method of handicapping. So when it came time for me to do this book, I thought, well, who actually is capable of doing the research I need? And of course, I thought of Ken. I'd also worked with Jim Kramer in the past, who did great work, and Jim Bale and some other people. But Ken doesn't live that far from me, strangely enough. And so we had fun going back and forth on the book. I'd usually come up with an idea. Let's research so-and-so. Here's what I suggest how to do it. He says, well, the way I've written the program, I could do such and such and so on. I said, okay, let's do that. And then we'll figure it out. So it was a collaborative process, and we're still talking today. So I guess it worked out well. No one beat the other one up. It all worked out nicely.
Yeah, you guys still get along. But well, I sent you an example of a key race today. And what are some of the things about like a one race antidote that keeps players from being successful? And also many of the handicapping books rely upon too much. I mean, this is the reason why you wrote this, the Skeptical Handicapper.
Well, people have written these handicapping books. For the most part, they want to show an example of what they're talking about. And of course, it's always a winning example. It's never, well, we did this and the horse dropped in class. There was a jockey change and this happened and the horse finished seventh. Nobody wants to read that book. So that people want to see successful events. The problem is we don't know if a successful event was a one-time event or it's a long-time losing event. So almost, if I say just bet the gray horse, if it's a muddy day, I might have a winner. Does that mean I can do that forever? Not really. So you sent me something about key races, and I'd written something. There's nothing wrong with key races.
Yeah.
The problem is, what exactly is a key race? Usually it involves a maiden race where some good horses happen to be entered. Now, one of them wins, and then another one finishes second and third and fourth. Maybe those second, third, and fourth winners all ran good races. They're going to have the best numbers going into the next race. And of course, every once in a while, a horse who did nothing the first time because he was raced easy, and maybe he wakes up for the second start. So there's nothing wrong with tracking that. I just didn't, it wasn't something I used because I had individual numbers on each horse. So I could tell a key race before any of those horses came back to race, because it was a race normally that had faster than usual pace, faster than usual finish. And there were horses that were fairly close to the winner, not the horse won by 10 and the other horses are far back. So I'm not discounting that. I used it in a different way.
Yeah. Well, in my defense, in the article that I wrote, I lost. I didn't bet the horse, but I saw the race and wish I would have bet him, but I almost bet him. And because of you, whenever I write these things, I never write about the ones the races that I won. I always write about things that I almost had, because I don't want to be the guy, because of Barry Meadow writes about that one race that I actually won.
You don't want to be the poker guy who's always talking about his bad beats and never
No.
seems to win a hand.
No, as I showed you, the race I had, there were 6 horses in the race that looked like contenders, and this one horse, in his only race, had 3 horses that won their next race. That is so rare, and for the winner to have done that was in May for a 2-year-old. So that means he won this next race against winners. So it was a, as I said, key race on steroids. So but I still couldn't bet him. So whenever I try a race like that, whenever I talk about a race, I never do about the one that I had, because I always respect what you always said, because you're right. It's easy to pick the gray horse in a field of bays and say, hey, you picked the gray horse, you won this time. Because, you can always find 100 examples one way and 1,000 the other way.
Well, what I like to do on that concept that you talked about was I like to identify the key races even before they race. I'll tell you how. Let's say, for example, I always had par numbers for each of my numbers. So I'll make a number up because I don't remember exactly. But let's say if a horse was a 10 claimer, a horse that was rated 13 or 14 on my list would probably be winners. A horse that was 7 or 8 would not. So sometimes you'd have a race where there were 3 or 4 of these horses that were all 13s, 14s, 15s entered, and the same class on the same day had a bunch of 9s and 10s. Well, I could tell you, even before those horses raced, the horses that had the highest ratings, they were going to go on to stay in that same class next time, and maybe they wouldn't have the other difficult opponents that have the 9s or 10s to beat. So a lot of times you can identify these races before the gates open, because who's entered in the race is stronger than the usual number for that class. Of course, with maidens and lately raced horses, they have to race first.
Yeah. Well, one thing you talk about in the Skeptical Handicapper is you make these class ratings for each horse every race. Do you recommend players do that? I mean, that is a huge time burden, but also allows you, once you make those ratings, when you have a field, you can quickly identify horses that stand out.
Right. It costs you money on the research time, but it costs you time, but it saves you time on the handicapping time, because you immediately can see who belongs in the race and who doesn't belong in the race. If I started to do again, yes, I still would do it myself because there's other things besides how fast the horse runs that would determine his number. Is he a consistent horse? Where is he in his form cycle? What kind of trips has he gotten lately? Does he have back numbers that could win? So there's other factors besides just what his time was for a particular race, because I wanted to get to know those horses, not just as a number, but as a horse.
Yeah. Well, one thing you talk about as a in the book is that most of the handicapping figures of handicapping factors, that even if they're profitable 20, 30 years ago, things have changed, and the betting public is getting better through computers assisted wagering, just or the proliferation of information. But like, for example, early speed or top figure, whatever players may have used a long time ago, may not be as effective today. I mean, the game has gotten it's so much tougher. But one thing that you leave us with is that there are not many handicapping factors that are profitable over many races anymore. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I don't think you can handicap just looking for particular factors. I think you have to integrate the entire handicapping thing you're doing, because some races, for example, let's say, for example, you have a front runner who's got post 8, and there are front runners and post 6 and 7, and the race starts on a turn. Well, if he barrels out of there and 6 and 7 barrel out of there, he's done. He's going to have to be used too hard to get to the top, or he'll be parked out the whole way, or he'll start fading quickly. Another race, he draws the same post. There's no early speed inside him, and he can get to the top. So early speed by itself is a plus, but maybe in some circumstances, not so much. Everything has to be compared with the context of what you're looking at, not just, oh, the horse had a fast workout, therefore so-and-so, or the horse is dropping in class, therefore so-and-so. Every horse brings something to the table, and you have to see who's in the race, how the race lines up. And that's what I learned really from harness racing. Harness racing is all about trip handicapping. Who's going to be where, who's going to make what kind of move, who's going to be first over and second over. Horse racing is not quite like that, but it still has a lot of elements of the trip. Who's going to get what kind of trip? And you have to figure out what the horse likes, what's his post, who are his opponents, what's likely to happen in the race. And then you can handicap from there.
Yeah. Well, one thing you talk a lot about is the difference between impact value and return on investment. So, when I watch TV, a lot of times the talking heads on TVG, or I guess it's called Race Fans Sports. I forgot what it's called now. Well, they'll say, yeah, this horse is going to get the lead. He's dangerous or whatever. But unfortunately, all the things they talk about are already baked into the odds. So
And also, what price is the horse going to be? That's what I care about.
Exactly. So explain the difference between impact value and return on investment.
Well, impact value, you could have a factor that produces a lot of winners, such as if a horse wins a lot of races, or the trainer has a high win percentage. The trainers who win 22% win a lot more races than the trainers that win 4%. We know that. The question is, can you make money using these factors? And I say probably not, but there's ways to use those factors to make money. Part of this today, because you were talking, and rightly so, about how things have changed, and things have certainly gotten tougher, which is why I don't say, gee, I'll start handicapping today and make a lot of money. Don't know if I could even do it, not even sure. But there are still some factors that are not so easily quantified that an individual can do. For example, let's say somebody's a body language expert, and they have body language notes on every horse at the track. And when the horse comes out, they write them down. How does the horse look? Does he look better than last time, worse than last time? Is he short stepping? What's happening with his, that might be an area that you can do something with. Trip handicapping, because it's subjective to some extent, sometimes I would find errors in the racing form charts. So there are ways to watch trips. I mean, just as an example, people say, well, the horse was fifth and he did so and so. Well, where was he fifth? Was he fifth in between two horses and they were all battling for the same spot? Or was he by himself behind 4 duelers? Very, very important. So subtly understanding horses' trips is something that computers can't quite do as well as a human can do.
Yeah.
So those are 2 areas off the top, the body language and the trips. Also, you might know something about certain trainers at your track that a computer can just look at their overall record or the record for the last 2 weeks or the record for the last year. But you know, in this spot, this is how he prepares his horses. This is the workout pattern he's used to have a lot of his winners. Another horse he prepares doesn't have the same pattern, probably not going to be a winner. Computers don't pick that up as well as humans can who keep those kind of records. Track biases, how are you going to calculate track biases? There are different ways to do it. Maybe you can do a better job than a computer. Maybe you're using a different method than the computer uses to determine a bias, or maybe it doesn't even use a bias. Who knows? We don't know exactly because there are several different computer teams, and there's also a lot of different computer programs. They all use different things. So the fact that they like a horse, you know, a 6-5 favorite, doesn't necessarily mean I like the horse a 6-5 favorite, because I've seen something. I know this horse doesn't like this particular spot. It's just he needs a different spot. And when he gets his spot, when he gets his situation, that's where I like to bet. So I've had many days over the years where I'd look at the entries 3 days in advance and I say, you know what, the 4th race on Friday, I'm going to make $20,000 in that race. Because this horse who's done nothing week after week, finally, he's in with the right horses. He has the right post. He's got the right this. This is his spot. Now, I wasn't always right, of course. Sometimes there'd be some thousands going out. But I've made a lot of money on races where I could see the whole thing in my mind before it existed, and not just waiting for a horse. Maybe I didn't even care about that horse. I remember one time making a giant score on a race at Golden Gate, which wound up going off at 5-1. I had him at even money. He'd raced twice in his career. He was a maiden. He raced twice in Southern California. Both times parked the whole mile. Once he was parked in 7th the whole mile all the way around. He's 4 wide the whole mile around. He lost by a length and a half. According to the chart, he's 7th, 7th, 7th. Well, yeah, he was 7th. That's true. But he covered so much ground. I say, if this horse gets his spot, so they dropped him into a maiden 32 at Golden Gate. I went, yes, money's coming my way. Each quarter, he extended his lead. Boom, 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 boom. By the time the race was over, he was so far in front, he would have needed binoculars to see the rest of the crowd. But that's just from watching races. And if you don't watch races, you can't just look at a form or look at a computer number or a printout and say, haha, I see this.
So I want to get back to computer assisted wagering and how to beat them. But when you had this horse at Golden Gate and it actually came through for you, do you bet more where your opinion is stronger? Like,
Absolutely.
for example, me.
Depends what his odds. If my opinion was strong and he was 4-5, who cares? I wouldn't have bet anything on it. So if you have a strong opinion and you're getting more of a value, that's when you should make your biggest bets, because you should make your biggest bets when you have your strong opinion.
Right.
Because there's a lot of races that are very difficult. A lot of horses have a chance. It's not clear how the pace is going to be. Some horses their form is questionable. A horse taking a giant drop down. What kind of shape is he in? 2 other horses coming off layoffs. Another horse has a trainer switch. There's a lot of confounding factors, makes it very hard to make a line. So when you have a race where you say, okay, here's the situation, I can see this, I can see the whole scenario occurring, that's when you should be making your big bets.
See, the problem I have with that is I think in theory it's perfect. And 20 years ago, that's how I approached the game, because I approached the game like you did. I would set odds for each horse that I'd bet them. I look at the odds board and I would play based on the odds. But now, the big money, some folks think 80% of the money is coming in the last minute because it's betting in the same fashion that Barry Meadow would bet. It's looking for prices that are out of whack. It's looking for discrepancies in the odds, and so horses that are 8-5. A minute to post will be 7-2 once the race starts. Horses that are 4-1, a minute to post will be 6-5 during the running. It's really hard. I'm sorry.
One thing I did especially the last few years when I was working out of my home office,
Mhm.
I had the exacta prices on the screen, the daily double prices on the screen, and the win odds and the exchange prices on the screen.
Mhm.
So using all those, I could pretty much figure out what the horse was going to be. So I didn't get too excited if he was 3-1, and I said, "Oh man, I only need 2-1 for this horse. This is great." I'd look on the exchange, the horse would be 9-5, or I'd check the exactas, and the horse would be 2-1 the exact. In other words, almost all the time I could figure out who was going to get pounded at the end. And of course, usually the pounding is the horses that are well bet in the first place.
Yeah.
Just the money's coming in at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes you're going to get, sometimes that's why you have to have a safety margin. You can't say, I make the horse 2-1. So if he's 5-2, I'm going to make a huge bet. Well, he might be 5-2, and then his odds might go down to 8-5 or 9-5. And then you're betting an underlay, which is the sure way to not wind up making any money. So what I did is I used all the information available, not just his win odds on the big fat tote board over there, but I had, at one time, there were 4 exchanges in operation. By the time I got finished, 2 of them were already out of business. And now the only place you can bet on exchanges is Betfair if you live in New Jersey. So it's the whole, and then also the rates they were giving were tremendous in those days, and now they're not. But so I had all those boards up on my screen, and I had the win odds, and I had exact odds. And I've been to places where guys have 6 TVs where they have all kinds of stuff, so they can look at things. I only had the 2 plus the live television. I have 2 screens plus a live TV. But I could set the thing up so that I had a little exchange in this corner, a little exchange over there, so I could see what was going on. And that gave me a pretty good idea what the horse was going to be. And if I didn't knew that, I would get swept away like others when the horse got pounded at the end and say, "Oh, why did I wind up with that horse?" Which of course you never want to do, but you can't 100% prevent that. Maybe someday horse racing will decide it's worth the money to try to fix this problem. But right now, people they don't want to spend. They want to be able to take sports bets. They don't really care that much about horse bets. And they figure when sports betting is into their facility, people are not going to worry about the horses so much, so why spend the money?
So when you say the problem, the problem is that folks are being able to bet very late, or what exactly is the problem? Because, like, for example, the way I handle what you're talking about is if I like a horse, I have to anticipate in my mind whether this is the kind of factor that the public undervalues, and I'll bet them based on that. I don't wait anymore because I figure I never know what the public's going to do in the last 30 seconds. It changes so drastically that who knows? I don't care about the odds anymore. I bet based on the factor that I'm betting on, whether or not the public generally undervalues that. If it's something that I saw, a trip that I saw, like horse running between horses, a bias play, a pedigree play that was more on the dam side, not the sire side, because the public sees that. So I try to find something the public doesn't value and bet, and don't worry about what the odds actually are, because I always figure I can't tell what the odds are going to be.
Well, that's one reason that, especially the last few years, when I had my home office, I was always betting with 10 seconds to post, 15 seconds to post. I was getting absolute last possible flash. And some of the ADWs would put their money in at that time as well. So you have to allow time to make your bet in case you make a mistake or something. On the other hand, you don't want to be betting when it's 4 minutes to post, when all kinds of crazy things can still be changing. But I like your idea of saying, okay, I know this particular factor is going to be undervalued in this race. I think I'm fairly safe, especially maybe I looked at the consensus, nobody picked the horse, and whatever else you use everything you possibly can.
Yeah.
I use the exchange payoffs, the exacta, and the double payoffs. Other people used, do it like you're doing. You say, well, I know the crowd's not going to like this horse because of A or B or C. It's a trainer who doesn't win too often, or jockey's not going, whatever the thing is. That's another way to do it as well. But yeah, unfortunately, we can't bet at the last possible second. Most of it, especially here at the track, you're waiting on a line. You got to wait for the teller to punch stuff. It's not the ideal way to do things. The ideal way is do it, absolutely as quickly as possible. I was surprised. I went down to one point. I had an account with RGS, which at that time was the biggest.
That's what I use. That's what I use. Yeah.
It was the biggest place, and so I went down there. They were very nice to me down there because I was spending a lot of money in those days. And the operators I saw were so efficient and so excellent what they were doing. They had all these little cubicles, do. I was actually afraid to start calling up tvg.com or these other places. I know they couldn't have done a good a job as RGS did.
Yeah.
Of course, RGS was giving me rebates, but and they could
course.
take things in the last second and not mess them up.
Yeah.
So, but I think now people have their acts together, and it doesn't really matter what service you bet with. But the later you can bet, the better, because you'll have more. There's more information.
So now you're going to give me a hard time. So when I play, the way I figure it is, I play in the morning, and I make all my plays in the morning, because I figure if I like them that much, then I want to play them. I don't want to do it during the day. First of all, I get busy. I'm working or whatever else is going on. And let's say, for example, I like a horse ridden by Dominguez in the 6. Well, he's already won 2. So in my mind, I'm like, well, he can't win 3. All these thoughts have nothing to do with that horse come into my mind, or maybe I'm hot, or maybe I'm cold. Maybe I'll change my bet. So what I do is I play before the day starts. I make the same play on all my horses. I don't want any of the emotion or the of the day to affect what I'm going to do. I
Well,
have to
you can also use conditional betting, because a couple of places
exactly.
will let you say, okay, if the horse is 4-1 with 40 seconds to post, make the bet. If he's below that, don't make the bet. So that's a way that was not available when I was playing, but is available now, at least for your win bets. Maybe not for the other bets, but at least for that.
Exactly right. And where I'm getting at is you wrote in your book, your brilliant book, Skeptical Handicapper, that one of the reasons why you retire is it's a very stressful way to spend your day when you're playing the horses, because you're constantly looking for changes. The track can change, but mostly the betting could change, what price you're going to have. And what I decided, if I want to play, I want to play horses that I really, really like, and for reasons that I really like. And in the morning, I must really like them to play them in the morning, and to have to play them in the morning. I don't want to wait to 3 o'clock, a minute for post, see if the changes are going to happen. So when I read how one of the reasons why you decided to retire, it really resonated with me, because I mean, that stress, all those changes, it can really wear on you.
Well, it's stressful while you're playing, because I was looking at the win place, the win pool, the place pool, the show pool, the exact payoffs, the double payoffs, all the numbers on the exchange. So I'm looking at a lot of things in a relatively short amount of time. Now, of course, I'm not looking so much with 20 minutes to post, but as it gets closer to the post time and I'm finalizing exactly what I'm going to do, there's a lot of stress. Plus, there's the general stress of gambling. Let's say you're going bad. You say, why am I even doing this stuff? If I didn't play this week, I'd have an extra 4,000 in my pocket. Why am I wasting my time? I should be outside the park. It's a beautiful day. So you start to tend to doubt yourself.
Yeah.
That's why it takes a long time to be able to get the results, to have the confidence. Not the confidence first. You have to get the results first. Because if you don't have the results, why are you confident? You have to feel like you know what you're doing. But I think what you're doing actually is a smart idea, because it's cutting away a lot of the stress you'd be feeling if you were doing it the way I was doing it. But we all, there's a lot of different ways to win. I found that when I was writing the book and I talked to other guys that were professional gamblers, everybody did things a different way. It wasn't like there was one template and you do that, you're going to make a bunch of money. Some guys played a bunch of tracks. Some guys just played one track. I just played these 2 tracks. Some guys are very big on body language. Others, like me, I barely know what a horse looks like. I couldn't really do much with that. Other guys, they keep these meticulous notes. Other people say, I'll just buy somebody else's notes. I don't need it because I'm looking at other stuff. So, and I learned from some guys who did some amazing bias work, how they calculated the bias. Very, very smart guys. So there's not just one way to do this. And it's not like person A is wrong if they're doing this and person B is right if they're doing this. The question is, what suits you? What suits your lifestyle? What suits your amount of work you want to do, amount of interest you want to put into this? Because most people who go to the track do not care in the long run if they win or lose. It's of no interest to them. They want to spend the day with their friends, having fun, having some action. Maybe they win a couple of dollars, maybe they won't. It doesn't really matter. So Should they put the kind of time in that I did or that you do? No, they shouldn't. They want to just relax and have a good time. Why have the extra stress? If you're going to do this for a living, it's a whole other different deal. And you're going to have to get used to it. Just like if you're, if you're a doctor operating on a patient and the patient can live or die, there's a lot of stress doing that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you never quite get rid of that. That stress never really goes away. If you're in the major leagues, you can get sent down to the minors at any time. A lot of stress every time you go to bat. Will this be my last at bat in the majors? Don't know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stress doing this, but there's a lot of stress in other things. And you have to decide if it's worth it for you to do it, because it's going to take its toll. It certainly took its toll on me, and it's taken its toll on many, many other things. And one way to stop that is you have friends that are doing this and other people you know. I could tell you a story. There was this, at the harness race, this guy named Bob was a tremendous professional gambler. He played the dogs, he played the quarter horses, he played thoroughbreds, and he played harness. I've never met anybody that was at that level on all those things. And he came up with really innovative ways to do the handicapping. Anyway, one day we're at the track and we're looking at the board and we say, this 6-5 shot is terrible. He says, this is the worst 6-5 shot I've ever seen. I said, we have to bet this race. We certainly do. It doesn't matter who we're betting. We're certainly not betting that horse for sure. We're going to structure plays against that horse. We weren't partners, but we used to talk about what was going on. Anyway, the race goes on. 6-5 shots, goes and finds a spot on the rail. Everybody else is parked wide, crashing into each other. He pulls out the head of the stretch. He inches along, boop, 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 inching along, barely gets the lead, a foot from the wire, a foot past the wire. Another horse has passed him on the side. He had this one moment where he was leading the race and he won the race. So Bob looks at me and he says, well, Barry, that's one for the civilians. You're not going to win every race.
Yeah.
You're going to get stressed. You decide how much effort you want to put into this. Because, it can be a very rewarding game, not just the money, but also the fact that you've done something which is very, very difficult to do.
Well, today at 6-5, you just figure, well, it'll be 7-2 once the gate opens. So you wouldn't even bother with it. So the old days, Mark Kramer, my good friend, him and Bill Olmsted had a report. And me and you wrote for it, and others wrote for it. And you and Mark used to argue a lot, and because Mark had all these ideas, and still does. And he still writes. He writes with me as well. And you always wanted evidence. You wanted evidence, and it's great that Mark liked certain trainer patterns or like certain pedigree patterns. But I mean, there's a work over 100, over 1,000 races. That's the key. So you never let Mark get away with that. And we used to have great debates back in the day. So last year in the form now, they print trainer stats that are pretty good. The problem is, what you have to remember is they have the ROI right there in the percentage. So there was a particular trainer that had won 23% with a great ROI over 200 races, which is not a small sample, pretty good sample. So I said, Mark, a couple things here. First of all, everything regresses towards the mean. So you have to, even if it's great now, there is a chance it's going to regress. So you have to remember that. But also, the trainer stats are written in the form now. So if Jorge Delgado, which is the trainer's name, has a $3 return on this move with the $2 bet, the public can see it. It's right there. It's going to regress towards the mean. So with Ken Mazza, you required 1,000 races for a factor to be relevant, to be meaningful. But to me, it's even more so now because the factors are right there in the form. Everyone can see how effective a trainer factor is. So it's very hard to make money on a factor like that.
Well, Julian, you bring up a very important point. The more obvious something is, the less value it has, such as the jockey's win percentage, such as the trainer's win percentage, such as this sire gets 22% first time out, the other sire only gets 2%. Well, great. The more everybody has access to something, the less valuable it is. And so we always have to look for these other, the more subtle, nuancy type things to be able to do this. And I love Mark. I've visited him when he was in Paris. He's a great guy. Unlike me,
Great guy.
I'm an argumentative guy. Mark's a sweetheart. He's
Yeah.
a really good guy. And he's right on one particular thing, which I do mention in my book. When there's a change in something, sometimes the change is sudden, such as a trainer who's never had success at your track before ships in and wins with his first 2 horses. Okay, you don't have to wait for 100 races there. Obviously, something is different here. He's prepared for this meet. You can expect him to do well. And you learn that very, very quickly. Sometimes trainers and in harness racing, drivers will get better in a real hurry. They were kind of mediocre for a couple of years, and suddenly, whether they have a new agent or maybe they just got married or maybe they just got divorced, who knows? Anyway, suddenly something has clicked and they're riding a lot better than they were before. And if you pick on that quickly, you can't wait for hundreds of races to determine that. You have to do that by observation. You say, gee, this guy always seems to be in the right spot. We used to be able to say, where's the wrong spot? Oh, that's where he is. Now he's changed. So you have to be able to pick up on stuff quickly. And sometimes you can't wait for all the great statistics that you'd like to have. And of course, the larger the number of events, the more people are going to know about them and the less valuable that thing becomes. So you always have to stay ahead. It's like in any business, really. You got to stay ahead of what everybody else is doing. Learn your stuff, but also stay on top of stuff at the same time. And I mean, you know, just to give you an example out of nowhere, occasionally a race will be mistimed. And the mistime, everybody who puts out numbers will have the wrong number on that race or on that horse. Let's say that you have an alternative source who times the races by hand and they have a different time on it. Or you have some other way of doing it, because I've seen race horses that time can't possibly be right, knowing those horses.
Yeah.
And so then I would get a stopwatch and replay it. Oh, yeah, that time is right. So I would adjust my number accordingly. Sometimes you have to see what's going on and believe what you see and not necessarily what you read. So pay attention to, and that's why you want to be educated as much as possible. You want to read as much as you can. If a trainer has something in the racing form saying, well, my horse is just prepping for this big stake down the road today, I don't think I have him ready for the race. I think that's a believable sentence. I'd believe that. You know, if he says, my horse is training so well, no one's going to beat us, I believe that too. Now, he might be wrong, but it's part of the information I'm taking in, what other people are saying. Not that I'm going to change every bet because of what a trainer or jockey or an owner said, but I'm going to pay some attention to everything I possibly can. Not just the things I thought I was paying attention to the night before, because I always handicapped the night before when it was quiet and I was not really mad because I just lost a photo for a couple of $1,000s in the last race, which some people do. They go, oh man, and now they start looking for the 8-to-1 shot, whereas maybe the 5-to-2 shot was a better bet, but they don't want the 5-to-2 anymore because they just lost a big bet. Yeah. So you want to be able to handicap when it's calm, when it's quiet, when there's no extraneous factors. I would go into my office, have a little quiet music on. I didn't have horses on. I had quite a little quiet music, and I do my handicapping. And when the races were on, I had the races live on TV and all the info on the computer in case something new came along. Maybe the first 3 races, all the front runners did well and they were not all 6-to-5 shots. And the horses were spinning their wheels in the back. Hey, well, now I got to make some adjustments. So sometimes you have to make adjustments. But most importantly, you have to pay attention. If you pay attention, that's the key to this thing.
Yeah. Well, another example of this, there was a rider in California now. I'm not sure how closely you're paying attention, but there's Umberto Rispoli, Italian rider.
Great turf jockey.
Great turf jockey.
Yeah.
So when he first came to California, I mean, if you bet his turf mounts, you're going to make some money. But what happened is the public is not stupid. So they started pounding all his turf mounts. I mean, it was unbelievable. So like the first 6 months he was there, I bet everything he rode on turf and I'd make good money on him. After 6 months, he was the same guy, same rider, but everything he rode was it completely pounded and there was no money to be made on Rispoli. I mean, obviously he won his races and he was still a good rider, but the public valued him and it was hard to make money on him.
just like it happens with trainers. When you have a new trainer coming to your circuit, keep a close eye on this guy because he might be really, really good and you might be the first to know it. Same thing with jockeys. Jockeys, sometimes when you watch him race, you say, well, this guy doesn't really look that good in the saddle and he's not getting any good results. And then a few months later, gee, the guy suddenly got better.
Yeah.
So you always have to look for change, just like with human beings. Not everybody stays the same their whole life. People change, the personality changes, what they're interested in changes, what they like changes. So, but you're absolutely right. People will pound something, especially trainers and jockeys. I always bet that jockey. Well, you can't always bet that jockey because maybe the jockey is 6-5 and the jockey should be 5-2. Although I do confess I was beaten by Russell Bays many times at Golden Gate. I said, he can't win on the 6-5 shot. This 6-5 shot is no better than these other 2 5-1 shots in the race. And Bays would so often fight. I say, Bays again got me.
Yeah.
But I usually bet against Bays rather than on Bays because he was so overbet up there.
Yeah. Well, one thing you talked about in your book, the computer assistant wagering, computer assistant wagering, and the whales generally. You had one of your best years while they were in business. So it doesn't mean you can't win because they're in the game. I mean, they're putting a lot of money through the windows. They're here to stay. What are they, and what is the key to trying to play the game that they are a big part of?
Well, this answer might surprise you, but I kind of ignore them altogether. In other words, if the horse is getting bet, no matter who bets him, whether it's the owner, whether it's a robotic group, whether it's a player who's playing for giant rebates by himself and doesn't even use a computer, I don't know. I just look at what the data says, which is that horse is 6-5, or that horse is 2-1, or that horse, again, using the other screens I used to come up with what I thought the horse was eventually going to be. So I don't know for sure what they're going to bet. Now I know, they're not betting show bets. We know that. They're not betting every single bet, and they're not going to try to pound the Quinella pool. So there's, unless they're manipulated, that's a whole other story, which we don't have time to get into now. But it has to do more with what odds you're being given, no matter who is the one making those bets. And they have meant that the odds are lower now than they used to be. We did a lot of surveys in the book on that. Favorites in 6-horse fields, favorites in 8-horse fields. The percentage of wins goes up, but the prices keep going down, which to me means the players are a little bit sharper than they used to be. I think we know that. But first of all, you might be on the same horse they do, in which case, fine, let them win. You might be on a different horse because you believe their horse is overbet or because your horse is underbet. That's fine too. So I didn't try to smoke out who was doing the betting. I was just looking at, there's a big bet up there, or there's a lot of money in that pool. And is the money being bet proportionally in the place and show pool and in the other pools? Okay, well, I'm looking at everything.
Yeah. Well, Barry, one of the challenges that I've had is when people are new to the game. How do you teach people about this game? Here's the challenge. 25, 30 years ago, if you were a really good handicapper, I think you could win. I mean, I had many positive years at the racetrack many, many years ago. But nowadays, even when I listen to the coverage on TV, they may say something like, this horse is sure to get the lead. In my mind, what that says, well, yeah, it's in the odds and everyone knows that. Does that mean you can make everything that you hear about the races now is baked into the odds? So whenever someone says
it has to do with the more obvious something is, the less value it has. If everybody can see it, it's not really going to help you too much because you're absolutely right. It's baked into the odds. It's when not everybody can see it it's a lot more interesting. And that's where your analysis of how races go comes into play. Yeah.
Well, so when you're talking to new players or players that want to get better, do you sometimes, I mean, you've written extraordinarily good books about handicapping, but do you sometimes just say, the best way to get to win this game is not to play it?
Well, I look at it a different way. Most people don't care if they win. They want to have fun. So I say, educate yourself as much as possible. For example, there's a publication out here called Today's Racing Digest, which is
That's
in
great.
several different places,
Yeah.
where they have analysts and analyze every horse in every race. They give his
Mhm.
opinion why so and so. That's how you learn stuff. I used to listen to the free replays that were done on national turf. They used to you could call up, listen to all the replays for free. Why they liked horse A, why they didn't like horse B. I read every single. I got a gigantic library back here of racing books from England, from everything about handicapping. I want to learn as much as possible. So the more you learn, that's how you become educated at something, and that's how you can decide what else you still need to know. But remember, most people don't care if they win. They just want to have a good time. They want to have fun. They don't want to spend hours going through charts and looking at computer printouts and things like that. It's expensive. It's time consuming. The people that want to do that, I think, will seek out that kind of material. But I think most people don't. They want to go have fun. They want to know. They want to say, oh, if I bet five has a better chance than 4, and this is why he has a better chance than 4. That's as far as they're going to get. They're not going to say the 5 should be 7-2. The 4 is no better than 6-1. They're not going to get to that point probably. But if they want to, there's plenty of books they can read. There's seminars they can look at. I mean, if you look at Andy Serling when he's doing his stuff on Naira Bets, I mean, the guy's a fountain of information. He knows an awful lot of stuff. You want to learn, you watch people like that. You watch some of these people doing who look good in the paddock. There's a lot of places you can learn, and a lot of it's free. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to really get a lot of help from what's on television. And that's not because the guys are incompetent. Because some people think, well, you always badmouth the TV guys. You must think they're idiots. No, what they have to do is, it can't be done. For example, they'll get a package for all the races that are on during their shift, which might be 18 races at 6 different tracks. How can they possibly know the ins and outs of all those horses on all those tracks? They can't do it. There's just not enough time to do it. And they have to come up with some kind of explanation, and they got to do it in a very tiny amount of time. Oh, yeah. So this horse, he's finished second his last 2. He looks like he's due. Well, what does that mean? Nothing. Or they'll show a replay from the top of the stretch, which means absolutely nothing as far as what that means as far as today's race. I can't blame them because of this, how the setup is. They don't have time to get into stuff. Some of the local guys do, however. Some of the local, your local handicapper, Sally and Jimmy, maybe Sally's the good handicapper and Jimmy's the fool around guy, or maybe Jimmy's the good handicapper and Sally's the fool around girl. But they usually have somebody that can give pretty good opinions on races and help you learn. Doesn't mean they're going to help you make money, because you still have to figure the odds. The first day that that they come up with something on one of the racing networks that says, here's why I like him, here's why he should be 3-1 and not 2-1, and why the other horse should be 8-1 and not 6-1, that's when I'll start paying attention. But they never do that. They always tell you who they like or who they're going with. Where are they going exactly with these horses? I have no idea. Probably to the poorhouse is my guess.
The one thing they can't do is they can't say, I would never bet this race. Don't bet this race. We can do
They
that.
can't do it.
They-
They're working for a betting service or for a racing network. They can't do that. They can't say, I have no clue in this race, because I've had races where I can look at it. I won't even start handicapping that race. I can immediately see this is a mishmash. It's a mess. There's nothing I'm going to gain from it, unless it's part of a pick 6 or something and I have to handicap. But otherwise, plenty of races. No, can't do it. Now, I've done that when I've been on some podcasts, and they say, okay, handicap these races. Okay, I'll handicap the first and the second. I won't handicap the third. Third, I'm going to tell your viewers I have no clue in this race, and here's why I have no clue. I say, okay.
Well, you mentioned Andy Serling, and I agree. He's great. He's a little sensitive, and he definitely has this personality, but I think he gives great information. What are some of the other handicappers, public handicappers, and also writers that you particularly admire?
Well, I'm not watching things like I used to watch, so I don't really know who's on a lot of these.
No, just historically. I mean, who some of the folks you may have?
But there are a lot of knowledgeable. I mean, a guy like Andy Byers, a tremendously knowledgeable guy. So when he says something, I always like Jerry Bailey's analysis of the race. I thought he was very, very sharp. But there are plenty of sharp people that are out there. Randy Moss. These are not dumbos doing this kind of work. But the fact that the work has to be done and you don't have a choice about it, that's the difference. Because in real life, you can choose not to bet on a race, or bet a small amount, or maybe bet 3 horses in a race, or do anything you want. When you're on TV, you got to put up a sheet saying, I like the 5. And that's not the way I ever handicapped.
Yeah.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, what are the biggest mistakes that smart handicappers, well-intended, well-knowledge handicappers make? What are things that guys, they really want to win and do the work? What are the biggest mistakes?
Number one, above all, betting too many races. You can't bet a race just because it exists. Is there a discrepancy? How do you determine that? What makes you think you have an edge in this race? If you don't have an edge, why are you betting? Well, people are at the track and they get bored. I've been to the track, I go about once a year with friends. I'm betting like $10. I mean, we're having fun. It doesn't mean anything. But you think people are sitting out races among my friends? Never. They want action on that next race. And that's true of most players. They want to be involved. They don't want to say, well, you know what? I got something coming up in the 7th and now it's only the 2nd race, so I'll just wait. No. That was what was so great about the betting exchanges, because in every race, you have a horse you don't like or a price you don't like. Every single race, there's something to bet. You can bet against somebody because you don't like what's up there. You may not be able to bet on somebody. You might say, you know what? I've narrowed the race down to 4 horses. They're the 4 favorites. I don't see anybody else getting in the race. You can bet against the other 6 on an exchange. You can't do it at the racetrack. So the problem becomes sitting out races and waiting for your spots. And if you got $300, don't bet $2 on 150 different races. Find the races you like best, and that's where you put your money.
It's like just pure intelligence and talent. I mean, like there are some people that are very smart and the hard worker. They have, I guess they have the goods to succeed. But some folks, they love the races and maybe not the sharpest knife in the drawer. How important is just how smart you are and your intelligence to succeed at the racetrack?
We may have a different definition of what intelligence is. I think intelligence is being able to see a problem and figure out a lot of alternative ways to maybe solve this problem. It's not necessarily knowing stuff, because I don't know a lot of stuff, but I have Google. So I can just press some buttons and I can learn stuff. I can read a trainer report. I can do so. I don't have to be the brightest guy who ever lived. And I've met guys, I've never met somebody that I thought was, 50th in a class of 50. But not everybody was going to Harvard that does this for a living either. Plenty of guys, but they know their stuff. They do the work. And I think anybody can be taught to do the work. It's kind of like in blackjack. People think, oh, you must be a math genius to play blackjack. No, you don't. I could teach a 6-year-old how to play, and they can play a reasonable, they're not going to probably win, but they can play a reasonable game. And at the horse races, I think you can teach anybody to play if they want to learn. Because if I want to learn something, I will study every possible thing I can about that thing, learn as much as I can, keep adding to my knowledge base, and then be able to synthesize a plan of attack. It's the people that don't want to do the work who are not going to win. And the work is different for everybody. It's not just this is the work and that's not it. For me, it was watching all the replays and keeping notes. For somebody else, it might be keeping very, very close eyes on trainers. For somebody else, it might be going to every single workout and keeping his own notes. So everybody has different definitions that are maybe coming up with a great way to measure track biases. But whatever the work is, they're willing to do it. They're willing to put the time in.
Do you worry about the future? I'm sorry?
Yeah, I think that's a lot more important than somebody's brain power.
Do you worry about the future?
Yeah.
Do you worry about the
future of racing?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because sports betting is getting bigger. Sports betting has a much lower takeout. Teams are on TV all the time, whereas horses are not. So I see people shifting over. I see horse racing losing tracks in the future. And I think at some point we're going to have a number of big super tracks. Horse racing will always be around. We love horse racing. horse racing is great. It's not going to go away, despite the efforts of PETA or the efforts of other people. We love horse racing, and we love the horses too. I still drive along. Sometimes I go. There's a local track, San Luis Ray Downs, near my house. Sometimes I drive out there. I sit in the bleachers. I watch the horses go around the track there. I don't even know who these horses are. They're just beautiful to watch. So the game isn't going anywhere, but the number of small breeders has dropped precipitously. There are a lot fewer foals being born now, which means field sizes are going to get smaller. Number of tracks are going to get smaller. Number of racing days are going to drop. So I think things are going to slowly drop, but they still may be at a point where it's still a viable sport. Maybe not as many tracks as exist now, but I don't think the sport's going anywhere long term. And it's a great sport. If somebody wanted to become interested in horse racing, I think there's a lot of things now that weren't available then. There's a lot, I mean, just looking at the Racing Digest, look at all the great stuff that's in that one little publication. And there's a lot of other stuff. There's books, there's incredible stuff on the internet. There's a lot of stuff that you can get and get educated. And if you're serious about it, you can do this. And I think I always thought if some reasonably bright person can learn something, I can learn it. And I think that's true of most people. I don't think you got to be, you have to graduate Yale to be able to do this. I think you just have to pay attention and persevere.
Well, Barry, this has been great. I want folks to buy this book. It's The Skeptical Handicapper. It's to me the most important book written about thoroughbred racing for 30 years, probably since Picking Winners by Andy Beyer and your book, Betting Money Secrets at the Racetrack. It's a great book. It's funny. You teach people about the challenge, but you also leave hope, and you also describe where the opportunities are. Barry, you've done a lot for me. I've read everything that you put out. I really enjoy your work. I loved your Meadow Monthly. There's been nothing that took the place of that after you stopped publishing in 2003. It was great. But look, this has been great. I really enjoyed your thoughts, and hopefully we can do this again down the road.
Well, sure. I appreciate your comments and compliments. And one other thing, as a thank you to you, anybody who buys this book, they can go to the website, it's trpublishing.com. If they forget that, you print my name and it'll come up. If they order directly from me, I'll give them $10 off if they mention Julian Brennan.
How's that for Julian? Usually when you mention me, it costs you something. This is the first time when you mention Julian Brown, it's going to be a benefit.
Well, thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun for me, and I'll be happy to do it again. And I know you've had some great people on these podcasts, so I appreciate being included on your list.
Oh, Barry, you're great. I mean, your work is great. I feel like it's underappreciated some, and the reason why is you always dish a cold dish of reality when you write. And I think a lot of people they'd rather read something that it tells you how much you're going to win, but you're going to win $1 billion. You're never going to have to work again, and you've never been quite that guy.
No, well, people want hope, whether it's movies or whether it's horse racing. They want hope, and if somebody says, you know what, this is kind of difficult. You could do it if you did the work, but it's pretty hard. Nobody wants to hear that message. They want to hear, oh, well, I add 2 points for a class job and subtract for a post position change, and I got a formula, and I'm going to make a lot of money. Well, it would be nice if life worked that way. I'd like that formula myself. It would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, this is one of those things. You can do the work hard, be talented, and still not win. I mean, that's what the challenge is, and that's what we have to accept if we want to play the game.
That's the hardest lesson of all, is you can do the work, just like somebody who's trying to make it in tennis or golf. You can do all the work in the world, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make it. But if you don't do the work, for sure you won't make it. That's the difference.
Exactly. And you can have some fun, and maybe you will make it. So But anyway, Barry, let's do this more often. And I really appreciate you doing this.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Julian. I had fun.
Barry. Yeah, it was great. Thank you, buddy.